The insanity and backlash that followed the release of Grand Theft Auto 4 wasn't necessarily unexpected, but it was mostly inaccurate. To get the hard facts, we called up an expert, one that actually did some research before weighing in. While 2008 might have finally brought us Grand Theft Auto 4, it also reignited the battle over video game violence. Do games like GTA affect a child's psyche? And are new laws targeting retailers who sell M-rated games justified? Today, we tackle the controversial subject with the author of Grand Theft Childhood, Dr. Cheryl Olson. Joining us today, co-director for the Center of Mental Health and Media at the Massachusetts General Hospital's Department of Psychiatry and co-author of the book Grand Theft Childhood, Dr. Cheryl Olson. Welcome back to our show.
Great to be here.
So, for those out there that may not have seen our previous interviews or read the book, can you summarize your study?
That's a tall order. What we set out to do was to look at what's normal for middle school age kids today in terms of playing video games. We saw a lot of studies about college students having experimental things for 15 minutes and so on, and no one seemed to know what are kids today doing, with whom, why, how much, what's normal, because if you don't know what's normal, you don't know what to worry about. And given that youth crime has been going down in recent years as video game play has gone way up, you figure if it affected a lot of kids in a bad way, we would see something.
Now, did you find that there was a correlation or something between young children playing violent games and violent behavior?
Correlation is an interesting word. We did find a statistical relationship between 13 to 15-year-old kids playing mature-rated games and things like bullying other people and getting into physical fights. Correlation is not the same as A caused B. There's a lot of other factors that could go into that. We did recently try to control statistically for some of these other kinds of factors like aggressive personality, and we did still see a little bit of an effect of M-rated games specifically on increased bullying and fighting. But remember, those behaviors are pretty normal for middle school kids. So we're not talking about assault here, and we're talking about kids who are in public school, so kids who are otherwise healthy.
Obviously, this was the year where Grand Theft Auto 4 came out, and that always tends to be something of a touchstone for anxieties about what violent video games might be doing to kids. Is there any cause for concern if there's a parent out there that believes their child is or had been playing Grand Theft Auto 4?
I think there's cause for concern if your child is playing any video game, whether it's GTA 4 or something else, to the point that they're isolating, their grades are dropping, and they're not getting out and seeing friends, doing other activities, because that could be a sign of other problems. Maybe the child is using the game to basically self-medicate for depression or anxiety. State
Senator for California, Leland Yee, is once again trying to put a measure out there that would give criminal penalties to game stores that sell M-rated games to minors. Is there any benefit from trying to have this legislation to actually offset, the potential dangers of a minor playing a violent video game?
Well, actually, if you look at the law, which I guess was doing again this morning, it's not about M-rated games. It's about games that have particularly heinous and depraved depictions of, awful intentional violence against a substantially human-like character. It's a really tricky thing. One of the difficulties, I think, with the laws proposed is you'd have to have a whole new group of people, I don't know who that would be, looking at games and saying, well, is this character substantially human, this head crab or this big daddy or whatever, and is this heinous torture or not? You could have some very comical conversations, I think, behind the scenes about whether a game met those criteria.
Now, it really does sound a little bit like Leland Yee and some of these parents out there just don't seem to understand games, and that's where the anxiety seems to be stemming from, not so much what's actually material to one particular game.
I think so. When you think about it, if you're a politician or a parent and all you've really seen of video games are these awful clips of the worst possible thing on the evening news, someone using, a wounded enemy as a shield and full of bullets and then breaking their neck or something awful like that, which you can see in some games, of course they're going to think, oh my God, this is terrible. This can't be good for our kids. And if they haven't had the time to sit down and watch how kids play and what they do, it's really understandable that they're concerned.
My final question, obviously there are many studies that deal with this, sense of correlation between violent games and violent behavior. Some of them do try to make a case that there really is a direct correlation. How do you account for all these various studies that seem to have an equally diverse conclusion?
What you really have to do is take a close look at the methods that they use. And it's hard to do when you're not an academic type to look at these articles and figure out, well, who did they study? What did they measure? How did they define, exposure to violent games? How did they define a violent game? And then what kinds of outcomes were they looking at? There was a recent study that was labeled as a longitudinal, over time type study, and they looked at kids for 3 to 6 months, and you could have a seasonal difference in whether kids could go outside and play or not.
Dr. Olson, thanks again for coming on the show. You're always welcome here because you're a pleasurable tonic to what can be an overheated and ill-informed media debate.
My pleasure.